So, my first question, how do you get the landlord to do repairs? Especially if they're not willing to do repairs.
Well, getting repairs is more of a process than it is just, how do you get it? There are two mechanisms that one can do. First and foremost, I guess, is a tenant can always call 311 to report the condition which needs repairing. And then when they call, they're actually making a complaint to HPD, Housing Preservation and Development, which is the city agency that has the responsibility to see to it that repairs are made and that the housing is kept to a certain level. Now, that can be the first thing done. HPD, Housing Preservation and Development, can, after they receive a complaint, send out their inspectors who can issue the landlord a violation for having certain types of problems. Violations can be on either one of three levels, from very severe or immediately hazardous to not so bad. And based on the classification of the violation, the violation will pretty much say, this is a problem or violation, and it must be fixed within a specified period of time. Now that can be the first step, or a step that at some point the tenant can take. The only real other way for enforcement is an action brought in the housing court, the housing part of civil court, which is what's called an HP action for housing part action. And that's really why housing court was set up to begin with. Now, the major difference between an HP action and just making a complaint to HPD is that HPD will issue a violation without any real enforcement of any order behind it. But through a housing court action, you also get an inspector to come out who can also issue a violation, but then there will come a court order to fix whatever the problem is by a specified period of time. And whatever the route the tenant goes, tenant should probably always begin by notifying the landlord, preferably in writing, not by text or something. Most things that need to be documented are done by. It could be a very simple letter where you're indicating, there's this problem or that problem. Because landlords will often say, "How was I supposed to know? Right. I got, many, many apartments, and I only know if the tenant informs me." Now, many tenants will talk about, "Do I have to pay the rent?" Legally, yes, you have to pay the rent. But if a tenant will often choose not to pay the rent, but there's a right way and a wrong way. The right way is to, again, put something in writing to the landlord saying, "I've been complaining about these repairs, and this is to let you know that I will be withholding my rent until you make these repairs." The important part about that, if a tenant chooses to withhold his or her rent, is to hold on to the money. Because many times, and most times, the landlord is simply going to sue for the rent. And if a tenant doesn't have it, the tenant can be evicted.
Now, let's say I write to my landlord and I say I'm going to withhold my rent, and then he does the repairs. Do I have to pay all the rent, or can I not pay rent for those days where I didn't have heat or those days where I didn't have water? Is there any way the court can do that, or if I call 311, how can I go about doing that?
Well, not through 311. And I mean, a tenant can get relief like that through the court, and that is what's going to be called a rent abatement. Because basically you're saying that you didn't get 100% use out of your apartment because of some condition. So why should you pay 100% of the rent when you didn't get 100% of the use? Now the court will often give a tenant a rent abatement if the tenant's being sued for non-payment, but a tenant also can bring a case against if there's been an issue like that. The tenant can then bring a case against their landlord to sue for this rent abatement. They would sue not in housing court, but small claims court.
Oh, okay.
To sue